Thank you. Full house, which is pretty impressive when I hear that Caitlyn Jenner is on centre stage. So thank you all for being here. So is 125 the new 80? Wow, such an interesting topic. Before we chat to the guys, just want to get a show of hands. Who here expects to live till they're 75? I think I'll probably include myself in that. Who here expects to live till they're 100? Wow, good genes, good genes,
very
good lifestyle.
optimistic people.
Great.
And what about 125? Man down there in the green, yeah,
Fantastic.
I can see, yeah, nice. Okay, so let's chat to the guys. Let's find out if living to 125 is indeed possible and how the advancement in genomics can help that happen. Let's start with a very general point then. Gabe, I'll start with you. What exactly is human genome sequencing?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. So it's a technology that was developed, I guess, as part of the Human Genome Project that's allowed us to essentially know the sequences that are in our DNA, A, C, Gs, and Ts, that we thought was going to tell us everything about who we are. Of course, that's not how it turned out. We found out that it's much more complicated than just what's in our DNA. But we now have this technology that's allowing us to find out much more about who we are when we start off, which gives us the foundation to understanding how we will age and to what extent we can age.
Yeah, so Sumit, what could the benefits of these advancements in genomics be then?
Well, Matt, as Gabriel said, look, the way to think about the DNA, it's the instruction manual for each one of us, right? So if we can write the book of life for each one of us, we have the instruction manual, we get a sense of what our predispositions are, we get a sense of if something happens, what under that event, what you're likely to react positively or favorably to. So when you start thinking about really understanding, as we solve the problem of understanding different ethnicities, the variations, and all the other details, what ends up happening is that there's a huge amount of promise, because imagine a situation where the day you're born, you have a sequence, and that sequence allows you to know this is what we expect to be you to have propensity for. You can mitigate towards that, because the point is about making people healthy rather than treating people when something goes wrong. And unfortunately, if something happens, then you can change that and know what the right course of treatment is. So the possibilities are immense.
So let me try and get this straight then. So by identifying genetic weaknesses in someone, let's say like a form of cancer, for example, how can this information help someone prevent them from kind of getting that form of cancer?
Sure. So I think we need to take a step back and actually think about what's happening in our cells, right? As we talked about, what's in your DNA is just the beginning, right? And we can even see that just by thinking about our own bodies. We have neurons that are meter or plus longer, right? And then we have cells that like our red blood cells or white blood cells that are constantly turning over in our bodies. Same DNA, very different types of cells, right? Like how does that happen? Well, the truth of the matter is how our DNA is being used is changing all the time, depending on the cell type, depending on whether we're hitting puberty, what stage of life we are at. And so the truth of the matter is it's very dynamic. And in fact, while you guys are sitting there, your bodies are generating something like 12 cancer cells every minute, right? So the truth is, it's not a question of when we're going to get cancer, or if we're going to get cancer. It's a when, right? Mm-hmm. And it's actually knowing exactly when we're going to get that cancer that's very important. And certainly having the genetic background is really helpful, because it gives us an indication of sort of a propensity of getting that disease, which will allow us to be a little bit more vigilant if we're at high risk as opposed to low risk, and also allow us to figure out what kind of lifestyle changes are going to actually minimize our chances of getting certain diseases like cancer.
So genetics is one thing, Sumit, but lifestyles just as important, if not more important.
I think lifestyles are important, right? So if you think about the opportunity, there's a lifestyle factor which comes into play. There's intrinsically what is my code, and then the lifestyle factors and the environmental factors comes into play on saying, hey, this is my risk, when does it switch or switches off, right? And that's where the understanding is. But what is really encouraging, I'll take a slightly more optimistic view of the world. So yes, we know that these things are going to happen, but let's turn around to the promise which we started with, and that promise is there are 3 mega trends which are happening right now. The first is genome sequencing technology is getting faster, better, cheaper, right? The first human genome project took 13 years, was done in 2003, costed $2.7 billion. We can get the same thing done for $1,000 today. This is writing the whole book of life in 4 hours. And that is a 2.7 million times improvement. The second trend, which is phenomenally important because it has to tie everything together, is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence over the last 30 years has become 1 million times better. This 1 million times. It's not arithmetic, it's geometric. And what that then does is, over the next 30 years, we'll expect another 1 million times improvement. Now, imagine when you're looking at a DNA, which is 3 billion base pairs, what you're looking at is a whole bunch of correlations and drawing insights, and you have this technology and themes which come into play. So those two trends, combined with the third use case, which is what Gabe said, is around use cases. Now we know what to do with the data. We have early successes, and we build on early successes. And that's why I'm an optimist, which is actually fundamentally genomics and associated technologies. You know, you'll hear of all the other omics, microbiome, and other things. These are revolutionizing and will revolutionize the way that we are going to live. And this is why we are so excited by it in terms of disruption that comes into play. So I would turn around and say, very exciting. And then, of course, the environmental factors help you switch things on and off. Very exciting. But one area I want to speak to you both about is diversity in genomics. I mean, there's not enough at the moment, and that's a problem, isn't it?
I guess, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to me because we certainly don't know enough about how the DNA works, right? There's 3 billion bases in our DNA, and the conventional wisdom sort of says, if you're trying to do machine learning on it, for example, and you have minimum 3 billion feature sets, right? How many data sets do you actually need to come up with sort of machine learning that's not just overfit to some kind of noise, right? The conventional wisdom says at least an order of magnitude more than that, right? And we have what, 7 billion people on Earth, right? And we can't get an order of magnitude more than 3 billion bases. So it's really about understanding what kind of heterogeneity, what kind of diversity in our genomes actually matter, because some parts of DNA matters more than others. At least is the idea, right? And being able to understand that diversity, understand the heterogeneity between people and how it maps back to the phenotype is what I think Sumit's group is working on a lot, what we're working on in the context of cancer, and very much needed.
Yeah, and Sumit, I want to pick up on this because this kind of one-size-fits-all approach that we've spoken to about before to treating conditions, is that having an adverse effects on treating patients in different regions and areas? I mean, you do a lot of work in India, for example.
Yeah, so I would turn around and say, look, we have huge expectations from any new technology. But let's remember, it's only been 14 years.
Little malfunction?
I guess so.
Oh, there we go, we're back in.
Fantastic.
Start again.
So it's only been 14 years since the first human genome was sequenced, right? And when you think about it from that perspective, it is a sobering thought. The way we look at it is, it's the same space where internet was in 1995, right? Amazon had just started. Google wasn't even invented yet. iPhone was not invented. We didn't even know that such a thing could exist. Fast forward just over 20 years, you have a very different mindset. So coming back to the diversity point, we are really focused on that because the challenge is, because it's an early science, at this point of time, 81% of the data which comes in is from the Caucasian population. And that is the way it has evolved. But now to truly benefit every person, we need to have the right input. And the right input, because science is all about right data to be able to derive the right output. And if you go into that, that's exactly what we focus on. So we looked at the world and we realized 60% of the world's population comprise less than 5% of genomic data. That is staggering, right? We look at, in this room, it is very likely that the two of us will not be well represented. Of the three of us on stage, there's a lot of information about Matt, there's not enough information about us. And India, 20% of the world's population at 1.3 billion people of Indian ethnicities everywhere, and yet it's less than 1% of genomic data. So that diversity is important because science needs the right input to be able to derive and get to the potential of what we are looking to achieve.
So how do we go about getting more diverse data then?
That's exactly what we are doing, and that's what we have. The first thing is you need to have the dialogue with this community, people who are interested, with the collaborators, on saying, yes, it's a problem, and the answer is yes. We recognize it's a problem. Then the second thing is about going out there and building things in partnership, because this is not data which exists somewhere in ether. You have to tie up the clinical phenotype information with the genotype information and do it in a really ethical manner. And that is hard work, but that's the only way we can achieve the promise of precision medicine and live to 125. If I can go into the segue in terms of the 125. So, because that's what people are here to listen about. So there is research which is done. There's something called telomeres, which is basically, imagine it like a screw cap. So the chromosomes, the tips of the chromosome, because DNA is a double helix, they're held with a screw cap. What happens with age is that this gets degraded and worn down. So imagine you have a car and you have a tire which is fixed with nuts. The nut, because you've traveled 100,000 kilometers, starts getting loose. So what you need to do is, what association studies have found is, if you tighten that actually rejuvenates and reverses some of the aging process. It's early days, but those are the things which are coming out.
Okay, so less than 7 minutes to go. At this point, I just want to ask you then, what is the secret of longevity?
All right, let's turn this to the audience. How many of you guys, raise your hands, brush your teeth every day? I hope everyone.
Good.
Right. How many of you guys go to the dentist once a year or something like that to get your teeth checked out? How many of you guys have gone and done a full physical with your doctors every year? That's the problem right there, right? People don't expect their teeth to last 125 years without brushing the teeth, without going to the dentist every day or every year. But for some reason, we expect our bodies to last that long without doing the same thing, right? Without getting checked up. And one of the major issues is that our medicine, the paradigm with which we work in right now, is really focused on acute intervention. Like, we literally wait until people are on the verge of death, and then we try to bring them back. That's not how our bodies work, right? At that point, we've overextended our bodies. It's never going to be the same again, right? The key to living 125 years is actually for us to be as proactive about our bodies and our health as we are about our teeth. How do you do that, and why isn't that happening today, are really the big questions, right? I think one of the reasons why it's not happening is because we don't have enough information, right? Any kind of wellness tips that you guys have been given by doctors and things like that are usually population-wide studies. So there are things like, eggs are good or eggs are bad. That switches every few years. I don't know what we are thinking about carbs, I guess, lately. Carbs are bad now. Yeah.
This week.
And the truth of the matter is like, we talk a lot about precision medicine, as in medicine done on a single individual level. Why the heck aren't we talking about wellness done on an individual level, precision wellness, right? And that has to do a lot with what we're discussing here, which is we don't understand enough about how our genomes inform what's going to work, what's not going to work, because what's going to work for you is different than what's going to work for me, right? And same thing with Sumit, because we're different people genetically speaking, right? And so we don't understand enough about that, and we don't understand sort of how often we need to sort of check in to actually make a difference, because I think a lot of people out there, they know sugar's bad, they know fat's bad, they know whatever, any number of things, that they need to exercise 3 times a week or whatever, right? But I don't know, I don't do those things, right? Like, I don't follow those things, and I would expect most of these people don't either. And I think that's because it's not really catered to me. If I'd known, if somebody were to tell me, look, cut out meat 3 days a week and exercise 20 minutes a day or something like that, and you reduce your chance of getting cancer by 80%, I might do that, right? I won't do it if I read it in a paper that says, among 10,000 people we've studied, eggs seem to be bad.
Sumit, anything to add at this point? Secret of longevity?
No, I think that's great.
What new technologies are coming that are going to further increase the development in genomics?
So if you look at technology, again, you look at things like gene editing, tremendous promise, right? Stem cells, tremendous promise. And again, it goes back to the point about once you have the right insights, you can use these technologies, and they are changing the way business models and industries have been, whether it's healthcare or insurance or other things which have come into play. So very excited about those technologies, but again, we need to get the right input to be able to get the right output.
Yeah. There's a few ethical issues to all of this. That's a whole different talk, but I just want to put one thing to you, interested to get your take on this. If we are all growing older, what strain... We are, so this is happening. What strain is that going to put on the planet? You know, what do we have to start putting in place now to make sure, you know, if we...
I mean, I think we're seeing the effects of that already. A lot more people are getting age-associated diseases than they used to, right? The number of cancers have increased, not necessarily because the incidence of the disease inherently have increased, but people are living longer, right? It used to be that heart attack or something else will kill us way before we got cancer, right? And so we're having to deal with these age-associated diseases, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, way more than we used to have to do, and the way we treat these diseases is incredibly costly, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about these cancer therapies, they're over $100,000 a pop. And so it's already putting on a strain on our healthcare system, it's putting a stress on our resources, and I think it's unsustainable, to say the least. So we need to, again, focus more on preventative medicine, which is much more cost effective, keep people healthier for longer, rather than just be stuck with a bunch of sick people for an extended period.
I mean, that's when genomics can help, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Ethical issues, again, you know, it's huge. But any concerns that you kind of want to bring up at this juncture?
I think, look, with everything in any technology, there's always intended consequence. There's an unintended consequence, and I think we need to be thoughtful about it. And I think what I'm delighted by personally is that I engage with many of these the folks from different parts of, and who come from the same issue from different angles, and you have a robust conversation, and it makes you feel positive because those frameworks are important and they're being created. Just on Gabe's point, the important thing is not about just living longer, it's about quality of life. So I think the main aim that we have and we would like to have is to continue to reduce the distance between morbidity to mortality, right? So as we live longer, you know, there's a great Japanese saying which goes, pim pim peri, and I probably didn't pronounce it right, but it says, I'm going, and I'm active, and then I'm gone, right? And that's the sort of life that I think we are aspiring to, and that quality of life is really important.
So yeah, coming up to 2 minutes left. This final thought then, if you will 125 soon be the new 80, and when will that happen? When will people be living to 125?
It will happen within my lifetime, which I'm on the younger side, so it's a long time, I guess. But
it will happen in your life.
It will happen. I mean, there are people who are living today that are living to 115, 117, I think is one of the records. And it's really about what combination of the genetics we were born with and what are the sort of lifestyle, I guess, effects that they've affected on their bodies. That was the magic formula to living that longer and that healthy life. And being able to make those suggestions for anybody, no matter what their genetic background is, and making sure that we allow them the opportunity and equip them with the tools to live their health optimally, or live their lives optimally, is, I think, the key to living 125 years old. And I think groups like Sumit's is figuring out what elements of genetics is really important to pay attention to, and what kind of lifestyle changes we need to affect to avoid diseases like cancer, which is what my group works on. So I think it's really the combination of these knowledge that's going to unlock the 125 mark.
Yeah. So Sumit, as a kind of final point, I want a year when my children can live to 125.
So first of all, I'm still recovering from the shock of being called old. Right? Gabe just turned and said, I'm still young. So look, if you look at longevity stats, every decade there's an improvement of 2 to 3 years of extra life which is being added on an average, right? So someone who is 60 right now has a 50% of chance of being in their 80s. Someone who's in 50s has a 50% chance of being in the 90s. So in addition to that, when you turbocharge it with the technologies that we are talking about, I would expect that the kids who are born today are likely to see increasingly above 100 lifespan. And I would say that it is going to be very realistic that in the next couple of generations, we will see that change, and we will expect that. But more importantly, we'll see a healthy lifestyle and a much more productive lifestyle, because that is really critical to have a sustainable planet.
So there we go. You may not live until you're 125, but your kids almost certainly will. Gabe, Sumit, many thanks. Hopefully we're as entertaining as Caitlin. Thank you.